that will move us to our report from the Homeless and Housing Ad Hoc Committee, Supervisor Fennell and Supervisor Bone. I'll let you choose who kicks it off.
Thank you, Chair Sundberg. So, as people will probably be aware, we had a meeting on January 9th. Our ad hoc committee was formed, and then we reported back to the board on February 6th, and we had a robust discussion at that time, and came back are coming back to you today with some revised language and a different approach to where we're going. One of the things in terms of language that we've changed is instead of saying homeless, we're saying homelessness, to talk about that as the issue rather than any particular individuals. But I would like to acknowledge a great deal of support from the CIO's office. We met with CIO and also with County Council, and I'd like the CIO to maybe give us an outline of what we've come up with as far as about the resolution to create the Housing Trust Fund and Homelessness Solutions Committee, and also thoughts on a crisis declaration.
Sure, Supervisor Fennell, as you mentioned, the suggested changes that your board made or suggested on February 6th have been incorporated into the Housing Trust Fund and Homelessness Solutions Committee. And those changes can be found on page 2 of attachment 1. So there's some additional bullets under the duties. And in addition, the ad hoc group requested that the committee review any proposed sites or projects. And so there's a criteria on page 3 of attachment 1. And anybody wishing to propose a site or a project should provide a detailed project description, a detailed budget, and some insurance information. And then the committee would review that proposal. In addition, we reviewed the shelter crisis, and we made the change to that on page 3 of attachment 1. And that includes extending, there is no deadline. There is a review at 1 year. So I believe that the ad hoc committee has incorporated all of the changes that your board requested. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Supervisor Bass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the part about the project description, you know, how a project would go through the process with the committee, do we have, how quickly, I mean, I'm hoping that any project that comes forward, we can get them into the committee discussions very quickly. So how are we looking at doing that?
Well, first of all, the clerk of the board will need to create applications so people can apply to be on the committee. So once the committee, your board has appointed folks to the committee will, there'll need to be an established meeting time, because obviously this meeting will be, the Brown Act will apply. So the first meeting, almost, if people are ready to go, I mean, we have the resolution, they could bring their proposals to that first meeting.
And if a proposal, something comes up, an opportunity, would there be a potential then to call special meetings to get the group together if there was something that looked really promising?
Sure, absolutely, assuming that that committee is available.
All right,
yeah.
Thanks.
And if I might, as part of the formation of this committee will put together its meeting times and its policy in terms of meetings. So I think that would be up to the committee also to make that decision if they would be willing to get together. I think it's really important to point out, and I thank you, CAO Nilsson, this detailed project description will be very, very helpful for the committee to kind of weed out the requests that have very little merit and go into requests that we can actually maybe move forward with. So I really appreciate that, and I do want to point out that should we go forward with a crisis declaration, we are asking the committee to take on any projects that might come under that as well. there I urge people who are interested in this issue to read the packet that we provided today and to make sure that you understand some of the terms that we put in there. I think from my perspective, I really appreciate working with Supervisor Bone and staff on this. We put a lot of work into it. I think it's a good packet, and I do hope to get your support for it.
Supervisor Bass?
All right. Well, one of the things I wanted to add was, having been in Sacramento a couple weeks ago, the officers of the state association spoke with a lot of folks. I mean, three of us talked to the governor. Didn't matter what party we talked to, the pro tem's office. Homelessness is really hitting the state level. They're finally understanding that it's a bigger issue and that we can't wait 3 years for money to come down the road. So I just wanted people to know that hopefully, you know, we've got some help from the state that may be coming and making it easier for us. And also, Amy's looking at me quizzically. There's, no, actually, I'm talking other stuff. Anyway, so, and then also, there's a report that is being released this week, and it's on homelessness, and it was with the League of Cities and the California State Association of Counties, had a year-long, basically, meeting, and it's going to bring what's worked in other counties, and I think there'll be some ideas in there that could be helpful with this process as well. So anyway, just wanted to give a heads up of some other information that may be helpful.
Supervisor Wilson?
Sure, I want to echo my appreciation for staff and for Supervisors Bone and Fennell on this. In reviewing it, it seems all good to me. I'm happy about this. There's only one sort of grammatical awkwardness, and I couldn't figure out a way around it, which was it says basically when we were addressing.
Can you tell me where it is?
Yeah, I can. It's in under duties, and it's just where we're saying ongoing review of federal, state, local government funding sources for affordable housing and homelessness solutions. Homelessness solutions by itself is it's grammatically it's solutions to homelessness, I think, but it's okay. I know the meaning. And even that sounds awkward when you put it in that way. So I'm just saying I understand the meaning. I think your board's going to understand the meaning, or your committee, and I'm ready to vote on this. Well, actually, I want to hear from the public, because that's the only place I want to, if there's suggestions, then that'd be great. I am not hung up on it. I just,
Well, actually,
just
I do have.
internally.
Let me go to Supervisor Bone.
I think this is why I hate committees. We've got a problem. We're worried about what it sounds like. We understand what it says. We've got a problem that is, I mean, take a look at LA County. LA County passed a bill in 2016, Triple H, that brought $1.2 billion, and then 7 months later they passed another bill that was $350 million towards homeless services. The $1.2 billion was going to housing. They went into a 10-year plan to build 1,000 units a year, 10,000 units after 10 years. 2 years into it, they found out that their homeless population is growing 1,200 people a year. It's scary. They're averaging, they're picking up close to over 1,000 a year minimum. LA County, which is 1/4 of our population of California and fairly well financed. As we move forward and we look at things, I think I've said it before. We need to work with the faith-based and volunteers. We can throw as many declarations and resolutions and everything else, but until we get our feet on the ground and do something, and I will work with anybody. We can find funding to build whatever. Old hotels are half the price. If you're going to build homeless dwellings, hotels are half the price as new, and they're already there. And we've got a couple of them sitting around, and I think we should change the focus and move forward on a couple that are fenced off. I know they've been sold. I know who has them. But I really, the task force, I mean, I've heard every angle on the task force, but I want the task force to be able to start operating in 2 weeks, and a week after that, if something can happen, let's not have a whole bunch of meetings that takes hours that, at the end of the day, we walk away from, because I've been to probably 50 homeless meetings in the last 5 years, no more than that, probably 80 or 100, and our problem is exasperated. The only place I get anything done is when I get away from this building and go over to Betty's building, and she's housing, and I hate to keep bringing that up. That's the only one I'm familiar with, and I know AHA may be housing a whole bunch that I don't know about and everything else, but I know Betty has over 100 people housed, and she's rotating them out into permanent housing and jobs. And there's a couple, there's one developer, damn developers, he's probably hired 6 or 8 people from Betty's project that are now working, making $18 an hour, paying their own rent. Those jobs are available if we can get these people transitioned into something so they can go to work every morning, and basically it's dignity and self-worth. And I think it's up to us to create a situation where we can create dignity and self-worth. But as Mr. Price was talking earlier, 60 to 70% of those people on the street have mental health issues that have to be addressed. They have to be addressed before we put them into the workforce or anything else. And we keep talking about, putting these, we have to, if we're going to put them into housing, we have to put them into housing with services so they can transition. Taking someone off the street, throwing them into a house says, well, our job's done. And I know the Housing First Solutions that's part of the, we're committed to the Housing First solution. And if you don't think this doesn't weigh on, it's the biggest issue I think we face. And I think it's the most traumatic issue we face. And I spend a lot of times on the streets in Eureka early in the morning, late at night. I like to walk, and it's scary. But the other factor being is, I'm not sure if I'd want to live next door, and I'm not trying to clarify, but we've got to find some housing, but we have to find some mental health help for these people, because just a roof and a bathroom and a bed is not going to solve the issue, because they're going to be right back out on the streets. And I think that's where the state and federal government have to step up and quit with the lip service. And I applaud CSAC and the California League of Cities for working on something for a year. But more important, maybe pixie dust will help. But I'm just saying, I think we all know that the private sector with faith-based organizations will get twice as much done as we can do up here. And it's not saying we're not committed to it. It's just we're so restricted in everything we do. Federal dollars. If we go to build something with federal or state dollars, the cost of building is going to go through the roof. I mean, we just have to look at all avenues. And I mean, I've been to more productive meetings, and not that all these weren't productive, but with faith-based organizations, because they feel it in their heart. And I think, and I know some of these have stepped up and continue to step up. So I think when we do this task force, we need to have them highly involved, which, when we're thinking about it, and ones that'll get something done. So, and I want to thank Supervisor Fennell for working on this task force, and especially I want to thank Supervisor Wilson and Bass for bringing this forward.
Supervisor Fennell?
There's one a tiny grammatical thing that we can fix, but I just want to say that in the fourth, this one is not grammatical, actually, it's just a typo. So it's the fifth whereas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on the establishing of the Housing Trust Fund, and it says homeless instead of homelessness, where it says homelessness everywhere else. So just to be, it's the fifth whereas on the resolution establishing the Housing Trust Fund and homelessness solutions. So it says homeless instead of homelessness. And so one of the things I wanted to say also is, as people who've been paying attention to this issue and have asked me repeatedly what I thought of declaring a crisis, I had real reservations about it, because I am convinced that this the committee itself is Humboldt County's answer to this issue. The committee itself is what will make the big difference. But I think the solution that we came up with in terms of providing a crisis declaration is that it folds that in. It calls out that the committee is who will handle all of the ideas that are brought forward and how to bring them to the board. And I think that that's a good folding of the goals, and I think it makes the crisis declaration something that can possibly work here in Humboldt County. And I really appreciate the chance, actually, because of our earlier discussion, to go back and tease that out and figure out how exactly it could work. So I appreciate that very much. And just so people know, we do have 2 resolutions before us. One that is for Housing Trust Fund and Homelessness Solution Committee, and the other is for the existence of a shelter crisis. And that's important, the difference between a shelter crisis and housing shortage. That's another issue.
Supervisor Bass?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it's good that we've got 2 resolutions. Some, resolutions can be pretty simple, and they don't really say how to get there. It just says, hey, this is going on. I think I like the approach of being really specific in the other resolution on the path we plan to follow, because I think that holds us to, holds our feet to the fire in following those, that path. And I think we can make some progress. And I do appreciate yourself and Supervisor Bone working so hard on this.
Amy, so one of the things that came up at our last meeting was on, especially for the declaration, is the ADA issues for the federal government. Can you give us a little recap of the conversation around that?
Sure. It's important to note that any facility that the county enters into needs to be Title II compliant. Our facilities need to be ADA compliant. And the shelter crisis declaration doesn't apply to non-public facilities. It only applies to public facilities. So your board would need to potentially lease a site or a facility depending on what kind of project comes forward from the committee that we're proposing. But ultimately, any facility, any service the county provides through this avenue needs to be ADA compliant. And the county is in a unique position because we do have a contractor that currently reviews all of our facilities and all of our services. That's part of the consent decree. So we're in a unique position. We're not like the city of Eureka or the city of Arcata that are not in consent decrees. We are in a consent decree, and we have this additional oversight. And may I add one more thing? There's the Housing Trust Fund. Your board has, in the previous board meeting in January, wanted to allocate funds to that trust fund from the sale of the Lucas Street property. And so currently that trust fund doesn't exist until we have proceeds from the sale of the Lucas Street property. And once that happens, we'll create the trust fund and we'll deposit those dollars in there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, there's $700 that is in the trust fund that a group of us for 2 years were trying to work on a trust fund. So we got seed money.
You could donate to the county and we can put that in the trust fund.
Oh, well, in fact, I see Sally gave her money too. I made everybody at one meeting give money. So. Okay.
Supervisor Fennell?
And just one point of clarification, because I would ask also the CAO to spell out the process after passage of this formation of the committee. What's the time frame in terms of getting the word out, of us appointing our appointees, and of also appointing at large, as well as people getting applications in?
So the clerk of the board will need to establish an application, and they will do that quickly. They will post that application. Your board can actually provide direction today on how long you'd like to see that posted, whether it's 2 weeks, 30 days, 45 days. That's a decision that your board can make. Once we receive those applications, they'll come back to your board, and your board will be able to make appointments as you see fit. In the resolution, we talk about who should be appointed. Each of your board members has a district appointment, and then we would like to see somebody from the Housing and Homeless Coalition appointed, the Planning and Building Director, a nomination by the Planning and Building Director, also a nomination by the Department of Health and Human Services Director, And then we also wanted somebody who has experience in developing affordable housing projects being placed on that committee. So this process, yeah, while it's not going to happen next week or within 2 weeks, it will happen. It can happen relatively quickly. And then once we have all of those appointments made, then a clerk of the board staff will do their best to help orchestrate a meeting, setting a meeting time, and helping assist in location assistance.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so at this time, we will take public comment on this item. And I did have Paul Glennie that was signed up, so we'll start with you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, supervisors and staff. I read an article in the Times Standard a while ago where a coalition group wants to construct a 24/7, 7-day-a-week winter shelter for the homeless. I believe this coalition group is on the right track. I am here to give additional suggestions that I hope can help solve the homeless situation that is affecting all our communities. First, you have to address the mistakes of the past in order to have a positive and productive future. The political powers that be cannot let the flow of drugs pour into this country year after year, do little to nothing about it, and expect a different outcome. This is simply inexcusable and, quite frankly, disgusting. So as far as I'm concerned, they are indirectly responsible for the addiction and homeless epidemics we have today. That being said, I believe you cannot build anything unless you have a solid foundation. Part of that long-term building process starts and ends with someone's self-esteem, self-worth, and dignity. We're at a point in time where too many of our young people are choosing not to participate in work in the normalcy of everyday life. They have given up. Thus, our younger generation have become dependent instead of being self-reliant. Each city, their local groups, agencies, and communities are trying to do their part, but at this point in time, the problem is too large for them to handle, so it's not working. To help someone simply exist is not really helping them or society at all. In fact, you are perpetuating the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we are only putting a Band-Aid on what is already a severed artery. So how can we as a community, a state, and a nation help solve this epidemic? By spending our tax dollars on building solutions instead of ones that have cracked foundations. What do I mean by that? Create programs that have successful foundational solutions. First and foremost, we need housing. It would be the building, purchasing, or redesigning of an existing facility. An example of this would be the old Kmart building. So who do we help first? We must help those who cannot help themselves, which is the mentally ill and children. The mentally ill individuals are not only in danger to themselves, but to others as well. And if we can help the children right away, there is a good chance of them becoming self-confident, self-reliant, self-sufficient, and above all, become productive members of society. Housing and the treatment must come first. The only way to get housing is to get funding. This can be done through public, private, and corporate involvement, but it cannot work without the participation of our local, state, and federal partners. The private, state, and federal sectors can donate buildings and/or land. Long-term funding can be done through local and corporate sponsorships along with family foundations and trusts. I believe for businesses and corporate entities to be involved in such a project, there must be some benefit. State and federal tax incentives must be applied to each business and corporations that want to take part in this humanitarian effort. The more they participate, the greater the tax benefit. The burden should not be totally on the backs of the tax-paying citizens. Remember, the goal is for everyone to build their own solid foundation, capturing their self-esteem, self-worth, and dignity. We have and are currently wasting time and money on programs that do not, I repeat, do not work.
Sir, the 3-minute timer just went off, so.
Can I say one last thing?
We're actually, yeah, if you could pass us the hard copy, we can read that for you.
If you can give us your original, we'll make a copy and you can,
Oh, I'm fine. I got it on computer.
okay, great, thank you.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ken Sawatsky did it to what the last speaker just said. Very reasonable assessment. And I do agree with the site. The Kmart site is an exceptional site. Rex doesn't like that site, but a lot of it's out. The back area is all out of the coastal zone. Not that you would be using the Kmart building. Maybe part of it could be used, partitioned off. Maybe there's facilities that you can incorporate. The whole front of that property was designed for a bunch more expansion, which within the coastal zone could be used for new construction for the county if that was necessary to offset your back section. I do For those of you who don't attend the meetings, Rex had a term instead of expedite, expedite, and we define that as being way faster than expedite. So we should expedite these processes. To do so, I made an initial assessment of some of your sites, and the Kmart was a prime one that looked like it had the potential. The other assessment I did, how do we do modular housing? Well, I went up to Hoopah Tribe because they have a very large modular housing unit up there that is not being used whatsoever. They're looking for people to use that. Now, there are some constraints there. This has a choke thing. We can only bring out smaller units, not the regular size ones, but those can be easily designed. My son over in Australia does mining camps, and those are designed for that. We have a willing workforce that's willing to go there and work there. The jobs Rex talked about, contractors could be put together, most likely work with union crews. They could tune this thing up and make this a very viable thing, not only for the homeless issues, but for FEMA qualifications, which are ADA compliant, whenever there's a fire down south. So it's kind of a win-win. I went up there on the same day, I think to talk to the tribe members up there, and I think Ryan was up there, Sundberg, but he was up there trying to get his opponent disendorsed and use whatever influence he could to have himself endorsed by the tribe, rather than addressing the point like I went up there for, which I think is to solve the problems. So I strongly suggest that you consider reaching out to the tribe. I haven't had any, I tried to get Ryan to cooperate on this before, probably 4 years ago on this, didn't seem to be interested, probably still isn't now. But this is a solution to our problem. They can build and put together modular tip-ups for anything you want, the little houses, the tiny houses, any structure you want to design can be done. And of course, the funding can be, it's tribal preference. If you get them FEMA qualified, we could be moving them all out of the area if we had an inventory there. So it's just something you should look at. We don't have an economic development department that looks at these things. You really need to get somebody involved here who will address those kind of problems so the rest of us who are trying to problem solve and have the desired money to work with the people in construction can have a site to do these kind of projects. Let's think outside the box a little bit. Let's throw some spaghetti against the wall rather than, I guess we have, what, $6 million or whatever back in New York City of Headwaters Fund that could be lent, that's at 2%, that could be lent for this to the construction development projects of this nature. Now, I might, Estelle was trying to think what the number was there. Something like that. And it needs to come back here. It needs to be put to work for these kind of causes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Welcome.
Hello again, Martin Monroe again, and I'd like to give you my phone number if I could, 707-273-9918. I would be interested in volunteering my time and effort to work on any voluntary committees or boards you might set up for homelessness. I'm also a founding member of the North Coast People's Alliance, and we're already working on these kind of things, and that's why we started the organization. We have so many problems in existence today, it's just overwhelming. Something I don't hear people talking about, and a lot of great ideas on what we can do for homelessness. I hope you know that there are a lot of people out there who don't want to live in a mission, who don't want to live in a small, tiny house. They want an opportunity to move ahead in life like we should be able to. Something we're not talking about, and it's a real serious issue, is the real estate market. They're gouging people, we're gouging everything around here, gas prices, food prices. There's no regulations anymore in this country. We used to have a country where we believed 100% was fair profit. If you charge 300% profit, people would probably go somewhere else and buy their goods. We no longer have this freedom of choice. Everything's made in China, everything goes for the same price, and there's no price ceilings. We just keep raising the prices of everything. My cousin lived in an apartment in San Diego. The rent went up $100 each year for the last 10 years. And they don't do anything else to the apartment. They just keep raising your rent. Wages don't go anywhere. And so every time you raise your rent, another group of people become homelessness. As the rent goes up, people get homeless. And this is a cycle we're in. And the only way you're going to stop that cycle is to control rent prices. I'll tell you a story about my personal story. I lived in Iowa in 2012, where I ran for Congress. I was so upset just to have an opportunity to have a web page because I know they wouldn't let me in the debate, which they didn't. There's a good reason for that. I came out here with $7,000 in my pocket to rent a place, to look for a job, and plan on retiring here. I went to school here in Northern California years ago. I could not get an apartment here in Humboldt County because I didn't have a job, and the job didn't pay 3 times whatever they decide to charge you for rent. So if my income's enough to rent, and they raise it, and all of a sudden it's not, I no longer have an opportunity to rent a place. And so I couldn't believe I couldn't find a place to rent here. I planned for it ahead. I went into real estate company, says, oh, you have to have a job and it has to pay 3 times. I said, I got $7,000 right here. You want me to pay you 6 months rent up front? You got a serious problem in this county where you can walk into a rental agency with $7 grand in your pocket and you walk out without an apartment. I have a superior IQ level. I ran for Congress twice. I ran for the state house a couple times. There's no reason I should be homeless, but I've been sleeping in a tent for 8 months. I have an injured shoulder. I can't get a doctor. I have to drive all the way to Reading to get some dental issues taken care of. And it just goes on and on and on and on. I'm looking forward to putting Humboldt County in my rearview mirror real soon if things don't change, because it's just...
Yep, your time's up. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Peg Anderson. I'm here to represent Southern Humboldt. I'm one of the coordinators for Emergency Weather Shelter. And we have been functioning this is our second year of functioning. And as of now, we've done about 25 nights of shelter in Southern Humboldt between 3 different sites. We have a church, a community center, and a senior center now. We go between those 3 sites. And our system is very, it's a heavy load. We put a lot of hours of volunteerism into our project. We have to move everything from site to site. We're mostly retired people because working people and parents don't have time to do this. So we are limited in that way too. I don't think that we're really serving the homeless population of Southern Humboldt because, you know, our nights, we feed a lot of people. When we shelter, we have breakfast and dinner, but we only, probably 7 or 8 or between 7 and 10 people spend the night there. There are many, many homeless people in Southern Humboldt, including many children, and most of them have dogs and can't leave their dogs in their possessions, their camps, because there's a lot of theft and people are trying to protect their things. And I'm just here to say that our system, the system we've set up, was necessary because there was nothing else, but it's inadequate. It's not serving the general homeless population. And I'm really thanking you for trying to get this shelter crisis in place because we need a lot of help down there. We have no stable site for doing this, and it's a lot of work, and it's really not doing the job. So I hope that we can work with the county where really our volunteerism is committed, and we want to work with the county, but we can't do it by ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Yashi Hoffman. I am the other coordinator of the shelter down in Southern Humboldt. And the thing that I'd like to address on this issue is the next step in Southern Humboldt, which is not overnight shelter in emergency situations, which are very difficult to coordinate, and even getting accurate forecasting for what the weather would be. We find that we think we get a forecast it'll be freezing, and it is not. We didn't need to shelter that night. We get a forecast that it's going to be 3 or 4 degrees above freezing, and it is. And we didn't shelter that night. It's a difficult thing to do when you're taking stabs at it, trying to solve these issues. And as Peg mentioned, a more permanent solution is what we're ultimately looking for. And we feel that the declaration of a shelter crisis might give us more tools to do that. And I certainly appreciate what Supervisor Bone was saying about mental health. We cannot and are incapable of addressing mental health issues on the street. And one of the things that we want to do is to ensure that there is an inclusion of more money and funding and facilities from mental health in this shelter crisis to move it along. One of our things that we would love to do and are working on doing is finding a place, a location, to do a supervised continuous shelter. Now, we would like to do it with either tiny homes as one issue or small housing. We've been to many sites in Oregon that are doing it now and see what works best and what doesn't work so well. These would be fenced, they would be monitored, they would be drug-free, they would be alcohol-free, and the whole goal would be incorporating DHHS and any other service, even family service, into this facility to provide the tools that people need to regain their dignity and their place in the world, where they can have a safe place to stay, know that the things won't be stolen. Some of these places in Oregon, you'll go there in the middle of the day and there's nobody there. And that's because people are at work. They're not there during the way they have jobs. So I'm running out of time. I could go on forever, but we appreciate the supervisors getting on board with this issue to help everyone.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, supervisors. Whoa. CAO, County Council. Yashi basically just described AHA's model and working with everyone and doing basically the same thing. There's a lot that could be said. My concern today, probably more than anything else, is the formation that the declaration of a shelter crisis is essential, and yes, declare a shelter crisis, and then develop an affordable housing trust fund that makes shelter for all homeless people the highest priority, and state up front in the formation of the trust that it's intended to first and immediately address the unmet needs of those who are without legal safe places to be, those who fall into that huge gap that Connie Beck and Sally Hewitt described to you a few weeks ago, and that everyone else has mentioned also. 2/3 of the homeless people that are out there, there's nothing that they can obtain for housing or services. There's nothing. So we can talk about bricks and mortar, and we can say in there that the criteria or the priority for the criteria is bricks and mortar. But until we're willing to create some innovative, creative alternatives and write that into the proposal, because I've been doing a lot of reading on housing trust funds, and that's the place to put it. You put it up front. You write it into the document. And as well, the duties that you want that committee to do, you write it into the document. This one is very weak. It says, review, maintain, be familiar with, provide a forum. Those things are not actionable items. There needs to be stuff in there that says you will apply for and you will do some actionable things. And so what I'm saying to you is this isn't going to get us very far down the road. And I say that very sincerely. I want to work with you. You said you wanted to work with us. We want to work together. But let's do that without 3 minutes of talking to each other like this. It doesn't work. And so what we really need to do, I will ask you, rather than make a decision today on what you have in this proposal, is put it off until it can be actually developed and flushed out into something that's actually going to address the highest need we have in our community, which is the unmet need, that huge gap. Because once we start doing that, and that's not to say brick and mortar isn't important. It is. It's very important, and we need it all down the road. We need to put people into places. But if we don't do something to address the immediate needs, which are the things that are costing us money, you've heard every professional, many professionals come here and everybody talk about the gap and the problem with services and people dying and everything else. That is not going to change. That is going to continue, and we're going to continue to exacerbate our problem until we put that up as the priority for the Community Housing Trust Fund, because that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to meet the unmet needs of the community. I've done a lot of research on it. So can we please try to do that? We're all willing to work with you and work hard. We just have to do this in a way that we can make something happen that will actually work.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. My name's Edie Jessup, and I live in Manila. And so what you do here around homelessness really impacts me and where I live. I want to thank you for bringing the declaration of a shelter crisis to the agenda for discussion and expanding public understanding of the dilemma we're in here in Humboldt County. The ad hoc committee has brought forward an amended declaration of shelter crisis, you bravely noted that there is indeed a crisis and not enough housing. That is a start toward minding the large gap in immediate shelter and long-term, the lack of affordable housing available. I would hope that in the discussion of declaring a shelter crisis, you would amend the resolution in an important way. The fourth whereas says that camping activities during the winter months put people at risk. Please redact winter shelter. People do not have safe places to be all year long, and we've heard from Southern Humboldt the difficulties of volunteer extreme weather shelter that does not serve. And at the therefore be it resolved, thank you for indicating that private groups and faith communities, if you will, may not be adequate to meet the needs for shelter. This crisis is going to take all of us working together with intention to mind the gap in housing with really innovative solutions that focus on the existing hundreds of folks with nowhere to go, a real continuum of care. By the way, living rough does not meet ADA compliance. DHHS has said that there is nowhere for homeless folks to go, and many who do not meet existing criteria for existing programs. Let's use the shelter crisis tool to create immediate stabilizing solutions. Not overnight and kick them out in the morning, but 24/7 shelter to stabilize and allow folks to begin to work. Between nonprofits willing to organize and supervise 24/7 shelters and county innovation in finding temporary sites, we can do this. And we could be a model rural county in the midst of this wave of homelessness, county, state, and nationally. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning again. I'm coming, I didn't plan on speaking on this, but as a member of Southern Humboldt and an active community member there, I was born in Garberville. I see something to really pay attention to is the mental health as well. To piggyback that with this, there's affordable housing issues down there, especially in Southern Humboldt. I mean, prices are reducing, so some of those issues are going to maybe take care of themselves. But the mental health issue, I help town cleanups and stuff like that. There's people there that it doesn't matter if they have a warm place to sleep and food in their belly, they need some help with the mental health. And I believe if we work monetarily towards fixing that with the homelessness, will help our whole county culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
So in 2014, your housing element had the first two implementation members were a housing trust fund and pursuing funding for housing programs. So thank you very much for doing this today. The other thing, I wanted to make some suggestions for your resolutions and things here. 2 years ago, you passed a joint resolution adopting the homeless strategy and implementation plan, phase 1, and the model of housing first is a policy for reducing homelessness. Housing first is a proven model, addresses also the issues of mental health, substance abuse, all that. That is the model for the situation that you have now, we have now. So as Housing First is the existing policy of the county for reducing homelessness, I suggest and ask that references to homeless solutions be changed to Housing First. And that where it talks about recommendations for homeless solutions, that it be recommendations on implementing the Housing First policy, because that is your policy. And that'll give a clear direction to where we're going. From the homeless strategies and implementation plan that you adopted, it says the forced dispersal of people from encampment settings is not an appropriate solution or strategy accomplishes nothing toward the goal of linking people to permanent housing opportunities and can make it more difficult to provide such lasting solutions to the people who have been sleeping and living in the encampment. This is what is happening. And as this is true all year, I also think that the words "during the winter months" need to be removed from the fourth whereas in the resolution declaring a shelter crisis declaration. Okay. Well, housing is the goal. For many, dispersal from campsites is the current reality. The shelter crisis declaration can help establish an alternative in the form of a well-managed camps and/or detached bedroom facilities. The shelter crisis can do that. But as the government code does not apply purely to private facilities, it talks about facilities of governmental agencies. I recommend that in item 3L of the committee, that it says assume responsibility for recommendations. I have it written down here, you can see it. The other thing is, on the very last part of this, the name of the needs to be changed.
Thank you. Ryan can take it, yeah. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Roy Dahlberg. I live in Trinidad. I'm not going to take very much of your time. I was a public defender in Sacramento for going on 30 years. We had 10 years ago big homeless problems. We tried to grapple with them. People in the legal community tried to grapple with them. One of the things that we didn't do, and I fear that you're going to make that same mistake here, and I don't have quite a solution, but I think it's really important that you understand you have to involve the homeless people in whatever task force or committee you set up. You have to find a way to bring into your discussion people who are living on the streets, who really understand what it's like, and who are suffering. And I would ask that what you do is when you set up your task force or your committee, that you make one of its first goals that it co-opt onto itself some people who represent that community. I really hope you do that. I'm willing to do what I can. I know the other advocacy organizations in the county are willing to help in any way we can. But I really do think that's critical. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I wasn't going to speak on this either. I just would like to say that I think that there's a real lack, maybe not in yourselves, but in a lot of people around here that forget that the homeless population are humans. And not only that, they need houses, they also need bathrooms. And I don't see a lot of them. Ferndale's the only city, I think, that really has a public bathroom, maybe some in Eureka. I feel like I've been to them before that are locked, like in Old Town, and you can't even actually get into them. I mean, they're human beings that are down on their luck, and maybe people look at them and they say, oh, well, I work really hard for my money and I pay my rent, and, you know, why should I care? But, you know, one day you could have a health situation and you don't have a whole bunch of savings, or, you know, you have a heart attack, $100,000. My kid went in the hospital when he was 4. He's 8 now, so 4 years ago he went in the hospital for some fluke thing that was actually no big deal. However, he had to get medvaced out of the hospital here. He had to get taken to UCSF. It cost over $200,000 just for the room for him to sleep in at UCSF for 5 days. Cost $60,000 for the hotel room here. Cost $68,000 for the helicopter airplane to take us there. That doesn't even cover the fact that he was actually treated with naproxen or naproxen, which is just a anti-inflammatory, but he was on morphine for the whole 11 days that he was in the hospital till they actually made a diagnosis. If I did not have health care insurance, whew, I wouldn't be here today talking. I would be on the street begging for a place to live with my child. So I would just like you to take, and everybody who might be listening to this in the public, to realize that these people are human, and it doesn't take much to become them. Like a lot of people like me today, all my savings is towards this thing to try to make my life go right, but now it's just all going wrong. So people are really close. There's going to be more people added to it if you guys as a team don't come together and figure out some way to make things right for us. Not just me, but the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm glad that we're here today. I don't want to repeat myself. I've been talking to you guys for so many years. I feel like everybody just repeats the same thing over, and I don't want to do that today. I want to thank you for your work that you've done on this issue. One of the things I do is I would like for you to declare a shelter crisis. I would like for you to take the trust fund. All that wording seemed a little baby soft for me, banana soft. We need to really put some wording in there where it addresses the people that can't get the services that they need, the people that we see every day, that the Department of Health and Human Services speaks about, those people in the gap. And so I would like for that wording to really be in there. That's really, really important. And when you pick the committee, I think what's really, really important is, of course, you have the experts that know what's going on with homelessness, but please put a homeless voice or two in there. It's really, really important. People work with homeless, but they don't understand homelessness, and they don't understand some people don't, Rex. They work with them, but they don't. And I just ask that voice be in there, because you know how important it is. It's how we get things done. And I appreciate you, Rex, and what you're doing. So I just feel like that voice, that homeless voice, has to be there. They've endured it, they've lived through it, and they have something to educate us with. And so I appreciate both of you bringing this forward, Wilson and Bass, for putting it on the agenda. But please, when we do this, let's really address it. So if we do that and we make it nice and tight, we're going to grab those folks up and we'll really address this issue in our community. Thank you for all you do, and have a good day.
Thank you. Welcome. And those of you in the back, can you move up just a little bit? We're trying to keep this exit clear. The fire marshal's been on us. Thank you. I don't want to get in trouble. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Madam CAO, ladies and gentlemen of Humboldt County. Homelessness is just one piece of my puzzle. Mental illness is just another piece of my puzzle. To give you a little bit, I do have a college degree. I have an associate arts degree in sociology, and I have a full scholarship paid by the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty to my bachelor's degree in community psychology by being an advocate since 2007. There is a necessity of having homeless voices on this panel. Life experience is a degree all in itself. Homeless people, we can come forward, we can move forward productively and proactively. I am going to be starting a community organization here in Humboldt, and it's called Homeless Voices of Humboldt, to productively and proactively share our stories and overcoming of where we're at and where we're going to be in the future. But we're going to need places at the table. So when I am asking, Homeless Voices of Humboldt is asking, very humbly and meekly, that this both move forward with the asked items, that being homeless people on this committee and a shelter declaration. Thank you for your time, your concern, and your consideration on this matter, and please have a good day.
Thank you. Welcome.
So much to say in so little time. Like everybody else, I thank you for your efforts. But again, I think this is such an important moment because basically what people have told you is there are extraordinary programs, social services, nonprofits, but there are gaps. And Connie Beck described it. They can only help the people they're mandated to help. And Sally Hewitt said that if people don't have money, they can get evicted. So in other words, there's this gap between who is eligible for the funds and who is house ready. And then she talked about, Sally Hewitt, that one of the main problems is people, pets, and possessions. So this is the kind of discussion, the back and forth exchange of information. If we don't have it, we're not going to succeed. Because I got to tell you, and I know that I did not explain it very well, but I appreciate everything that's been done. But this document that you're basing your shelter crisis on is not accurate. And I think as honorable people that I know you to be, you'd want it to be accurate. There is not a McKinleyville church shelter at the moment. And Darlene, and I called around, they used to have one, but it's not there, it's not operating. Darlene Sporn said that after 22 people, they don't have any more room. The thing that's exciting is that this trust fund actually is set up to meet the needs that everybody in this room has talked to over the last, 30 years. But what I do not see in your proposal is that it's based on that. And I appreciate it, Rex, because you asked for our input. You said you want to base it on models. Well, the model is beautiful. It's basically asking for people in their communities to say what needs are not met and to focus it on the people that need these services. And I don't have a lot of time, so I just hope that people will go and Google this. It's by the, different housing. You can go local, affordable housing trust fund, and you just find extraordinary programs. And basically what they're saying, it does not have to be limited to brick and mortar. That really concerned me, because if you're going to limit it to brick and mortar, you're not going to bring in all the innovative ideas that people have been suggesting. And I appreciate how often you talked about tiny houses. I have the transcript. Does anybody want to see it? And 5 times you mentioned tiny houses. So I hope that will be used as a priority. And Estelle mentioned it 4 times. Here's the thing. When I had a chance, and I'm no expert, I didn't spend a lot of time with people down in, who are homeless. I wish I did. But when I did have a chance and I turned on the tape recorder and I asked, they said, we are a family here. We watch out after each other. We take care of each other. And I witnessed that. So there's something missing when we don't have a way to build on what is beautiful and capable and transformative. And they taught me things about being generous. And we can learn from them as much as they can learn from us. So I just beg you, there's an advisory committee that can be incorporated in the task force process. Please bring it together. Please bring you talked about best minds, Ryan. Thank you. Let's get our best minds.
Thank you.
And that includes the people living outside.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Welcome.
Chair, members of the board, I'm Lance Morton.
Lift your microphone up. Rex, lift your mic.
There we go.
Lance.
Oh, there we go.
I grew. The ad hoc group could have taken this document and cut and paste and thrown homeless words throughout the document. You didn't do that. You took the document apart. You put it together within the concept of housing as well as homelessness. And so the document lives. I'm really impressed by that. So thank you for your effort. Mike, thanks for you bringing that particular issue forward, and the way that you guys embraced that was top-notch. NIMBY lives between individuals. NIMBY lives between communities, between agencies, departments, cities. NIMBY and stigma associated with NIMBY has been a crucial reason why we've not been able to stay ahead of the wave. The 09 or 08 economic collapse didn't help much. LA has thrown huge amounts of money at this, but it's going to take time for them to deal with the interagency issues that you have to get involved and coordinated in order to make these things work. I think this task force that you put together is a really great foundation for the county being able to do exactly that. I would recommend, along with what Supervisor Bond said, to focus on drug, alcohol, mental health issues, treatment on demand. A lot of it has to do with funding. Mental health and AOD have been underfunded forever. It's always been underfunded. That being said, there are restrictions in Sacramento that can be lifted to allow the Department of Health and Human Services to engage in more flexible service. The Mental Health Service Act, for one, needs to be edited so that we can branch out and reach more of those that are homeless. Right now, the department is restricted from helping those into housing who have not been homeless for a year. That's an absurd restriction. That's something Sacramento can do for us. But anyway, treatment on demand, do the task force. There's all kinds of different ways of getting this done. It can't just be four walls. It can't just be this. It can't just be that. It's a huge and complicated problem. We need to embrace it in that complex array by doing the same. We need to dance, and we need to integrate. We need to coordinate. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. If anybody else is wanting to speak on this item, if you could make your way over, that'd be great.
My name is Oscar Leatherman, and I live in Eureka. And I've been more or less homeless, living out of my van for the last 3.5 years in this area. And this has been a problem that you guys have known about for years and years. And it's time something's done. And when you have an emergency like a fire, you don't put it in committees and have it sit there for years and years. So I'd like to see something done now, where it's put up and said that we have an emergency crisis, homeless crisis, and a need for people to be housed. When people are desperate, they do desperate things. I've seen this town change, and part of the character of this town has been the homeless. And I see it moved along where people are no longer in Old Town asking me for cigarettes or spare change because the police move them out of the area. And instead, we need to go ahead and take care of these people. And I understand most of the homeless people I run into are from here. So I'd like you to take care of this now as you would a fire in your own home. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you help her bring the microphone down if she needs it? She's got it? Okay. Welcome.
I'm Holly Klingel. I came with 2 different prepared statements, and I hoped I wouldn't have to say anything. I take Mike's advice. I'm not going to repeat what other people have said. Because of personal health issues and family health issues, I am both a consumer of many services in Humboldt County and a spectator at how so many of the services just aren't working. And I don't need to tell you that. You know that. So please, please, we've got to have a solution. I'm afraid to leave my daughter at home alone because of her health issues, but I'm here. And this afternoon I'll be in Crescent City for her son's tennis match because she's not capable of being the mother my grandchildren deserve. It's nobody's fault. It's a series of unfortunate events. Please help. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, we will close public comment. Bring it back to the board. Supervisor Fennell, then Bass.
So I would like to thank everybody for your comments. I think it's an important decision that we're making today. To the people who've had good ideas, you should put those ideas together and bring them to the committee. This is the whole reason for forming this committee. When we first started talking about this, I mentioned that we had a mental health crisis and a drug crisis. That was not to say we didn't have a shelter crisis too. But I think the important thing to remember, as was pointed out, that Humboldt County has taken a housing first strategy approach, and that puts people in housing or shelter and then deals with the issues that brought them to that point. That's the whole idea. So this is part of the fabric of addressing the issue in a comprehensive way. And I say that by moving forward today, all the passionate people have a place to go with their ideas and hopefully the tools to bring them to fruition. And with that, I would like to move that both resolution establishing a housing trust fund and homelessness solutions committee and a resolution declaring the existing of a shelter crisis in accordance with Government Code Section 8698 8698.2.
Second. Then I can comment. All right. So I appreciate what Supervisor Fennell said. One of the things I wanted to clarify is it's not just brick and mortar. It says an emphasis on brick and mortar, but to me, the way I'd like to see this housing trust fund operate is having money to rehab rooms, apartments that are not accessible. I mean, Sally Hewitt mentioned before, one of the reasons we have money to get people housed, but the money has restrictions. It has to meet certain federal standards. So a trust fund can, in fact, actually get several things, I think, up and moving fairly quickly. I'm looking at Sally. Yeah, okay. She didn't frown at me, so I think I was right on that. And I mentioned earlier about the this report that's coming out from the League of Cities and the California State Association of Counties, and it's not a policy paper. It's actually basically a toolkit of what is working in other communities. And some of that involves small houses. Some of it involves a lot of really different, interesting ideas. You know, and perhaps I don't know if this is appropriate, if we could put it up on the county's website when it does get released, or at least put a link to it somewhere, potentially, so then folks in the audience could take a look and see what you think might be workable in our community. So, you know, I think there'll be some good information in that. And I think I really appreciate the idea of having someone from the homeless community on the task force. And I think, as the supervisor who probably has the largest homeless community, I would be more than happy to have my 4th district representative be someone from the homeless community. So I got a few of you in mind already. So that's all I got to say.
So, yeah, I was thinking about that one also, and that the public speakers did make a good point, and I think that there should be someone who is experiencing homelessness or just out of it, that I think that would be a very valuable perspective. I'm wondering that Humboldt Housing and Homeless Coalition, if that would be the appropriate place to have that one come from, have them nominate somebody or add a member, I'm not sure. I want it to be so it's in the membership and not have to depend on, because we're not going to be here forever. I'd like to see that be carried forward. Supervisor Wilson?
Yeah, I concur with Supervisor Sundberg on this. It would be nice if there was a specific seat delineated. I think that's what we were hearing. So if you can add that to the list, that would be great. Although, I mean, I'm not clear.
That made me a liar.
Huh? Doesn't make it doesn't.
Well, at least I got the conversation started.
All right, there you go. That would be my preference. There was also, I mean, this is to the motion maker and the seconder. There was a request to address basically making this year-round versus winter, and another one was a reference to the McKinleyville shelter. And so, if we could address both those things, I'm not saying to. I just want you guys to talk about it. That's all.
So I just did this with the McKinleyville one. I asked what the process is, and it has changed a little bit. We did have extreme weather shelter in McKinleyville that was part of one of that would move around in the churches. There was only a couple of people staying in them. So the McKinleyville Family Resource Center partnered up with Arcata House, and if people go to the McKinleyville Family Resource Center, they can get transportation to the shelter and back in Arcata. So there is services in McKinleyville. It's just provided in the next town. So, and they rotate it around the churches. So I think it's pretty close, but it is a little different than it used to be. I had a couple of questions. The Housing Trust Fund, and this is probably for Amy. If money is spent out of the Housing Trust Fund, do those, whatever we spend that money on, does it have to be ADA compliant as well?
It depends on how you're allocating those funds. If you're allocating those funds to a site that the county is leasing, then yes, that site needs to be ADA compliant. If you're providing those funds to a 501c3 and they're using those funds for services at their own location, that may be different. So it depends on the allocation, on who's receiving the allocation.
So it can be a little more flexible if we provided it to a nonprofit. Okay.
Super. And Mr. Chair, I mean, also those rehabbed, the facilities that could be rehabbed, a lot of that is ADA that's missing. So, I mean, I think there's an extra bonus there. We can fix up some, and somewhere people who have compliance issues can actually have their places available.
Supervisor Fennell?
Since there is no termination date in the shelter crisis declaration, I think the reference to winter months is irrelevant. However, a lot of the comments that we got were with regard to how, especially, how it feels more like a crisis when people are exposed to the elements. So I would not be opposed to changing the words of the fourth whereas to read, whereas such camping activities, especially during winter months, places persons at harm. I mean, just to recognize that that is one of the driving forces here of our concern. So I wouldn't be opposed to that if it was okay with the seconder.
It's fine with me. I was looking at Supervisor Wilson.
Okay, great.
What's it? Can you? I didn't.
It's in the fourth whereas under the shelter crisis declaration. It says, whereas such camping activities during winter months, I would like to insert the word especially during winter months.
So let's say such camping activities, especially during, okay.
Just want some emphasis that it's worse at that time.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a lot of feedback. We're trying to represent people's concerns, et cetera, and I don't want to just take that out. I think it adds a little oomph. So.
Can you also, someone address the person that would be from the homeless community, or do you have any ideas on, do we add a person so there's 10 people on this committee, or do we make it part of the Housing and Homeless Coalition? There's been some ideas floating around. I'd like to get some clarity on that.
Well, we have, the way we have it set up, especially with regard to a quorum, there's got to be 6 for a quorum, but the alternates can be part of that. With the degree of interest here, I cannot imagine that the alternates are going to stay away just because they're alternates. I think alternates will be just as much a part of the discussion as everybody else. So we could, to keep the numbers good for both a quorum and for ease of passing recommendations, we could maybe make one of the alternates which is appointed by the majority of the board. I mean, that would be one thought I had, so we don't expand it, or we add that and take away one alternate. It's up to, well, I'd like to hear what Supervisor Bonus said.
I'd just soon add 2 more members, make an 11-member committee and get away with the alternates, because, I mean, what's an alternate? You get invited to the dance, but you can't dance with anybody. I think that's alternates are a pain in the ass.
That's a great idea.
Think, and one of them can be from the homeless, or both, because they do bring some. But I just as fine do with the way with the alternates, and then you still get and make sure a quorum, set the number of a quorum would be 6 in, right? So they can't take actions or what in their advisory, but I would just do away with the alternates. I just, and add one person from either homeless or recently, and I hate to put recently, because then what's recently, you know? So somebody from the homeless and somebody from the, that's agreed on by the Board of Supervisors and the, I don't know, the housing, the homeless and housing advocates or something like that. But I think we can add that and then bring a member in at large to be approved of by the board. And so you've got one from the housing and one member at large, and the second member at large may be somebody else from the homeless or need to be housed community.
Okay, so the way I would word that then is with all of the, one member from each supervisor, one member Humboldt Housing and Homeless Coalition, one planning and building director appointee, one from the Department of Health and Human Services, one with experience in developing affordable housing projects, one member representing the homeless or recently homeless community, and one member at large. And those last two members to be appointed by a majority vote of the Board of Supervisors.
Sounds good. Yeah, I want to make sure that the person's a full member. I would feel, I don't think it's right to make them an alternate. Do you want to? Go ahead.
I just want people to be aware too, just because someone may not be one of the people actually sitting on the committee, these are open meetings.
Oh, yeah.
They're available to anyone, so anyone from, whether from the homeless community or anywhere, will have the ability to go there and still be heard. So, don't want anyone to feel.
That's the disclaimer. If you don't get picked, don't be mad.
Supervisor Wilson.
Be involved.
Sure. I mean, we could pick that person. I think someone had suggested potentially someone from the Humboldt Housing and Homeless Coalition could be the arbiter of that. Do we want to be the arbiter, or do we want to relegate that to?
We're going to do it.
Okay.
They're going to turn an application in. They'll have their qualifications.
Okay.
We're going to do it. We got one representative from that. I mean, I think we've made.
Oh, I was just thinking about.
Do you have that change, Ryan? So just so we're on the same page here, I did have the one where you wanted to change on 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth whereas down.
Well, there's one that was stricken.
Okay.
It says the fourth.
So with the one stricken, it'd be the fourth one down, and then you would change that to homelessness. And then we have the especially during.
And that's in the crisis deck.
And then we have removing the 2 alternates and replacing it with one person from the homeless community appointed by the board, and then one at-large appointed by the board. Was that your guys' motion?
Yes, I was just, I think Supervisor Wilson had a question, just making sure that that included someone by the housing and homeless.
Yeah, that's on there.
That's
Yeah,
so
no, that wasn't my question. My question
I was
whether or
reading
not
lips from over.
they wanted to, or whether we wanted to abdicate that choosing to them to maybe simplify the application process. So it wouldn't be through an application process through us. It would just.
No, we'll point
Okay.
Got that thing going.
That's cool.
We got it.
And then,
So the motioner and seconder are good?
wait,
Do you want to,
Are we voting on both?
that was my assumption.
All right, I'm gonna.
If that's not the
then I
case,
would-
then I
No,
need to
that's
know.
fine. We can do that. I'm gonna vote positive on them both, but I've asked this question of 30 people and haven't got a great answer on if we vote for the shelter crisis, tomorrow we can start housing. I haven't got a good answer what the shelter crisis does. Eureka's had one for almost 2 years, and it hasn't done very much. I think the whole aspect, we can make all the declarations we want, but I'm going to fall back on, we've got to do something and work together to do it. It's not going to be, I mean, I've got so many political emails that, I'm a son of a bitch and everything else because I'm a whatever and everything else. But I'm just saying, it has nothing to do with political parties. It has nothing to do with how you feel about things. It's getting off your ass and getting something done and quitting talking about it. And we can fill out as many declarations as we want, crises and everything else. But we've had one, and the problems got worse. So until we can all get in one room and sit down and figure out, and I think this task force is going to go a long way, and I support it 100%. But I have not, and I mean, I got a sheet of things that said we can take funding. If we declare this, we can take funding from other departments to finance the shelter crisis. That was number 22 on one of the sheets, and I highlighted that because I didn't know how many deputies we should take away or, you know, to do this, because then we're going to get another backlash, and you guys, this is going to be filled up. So I'm going to vote for this because it seems like more of a political football than it is actually going to create anything. I think the biggest thing is the task force and getting this thing done. I really do. And Jim, I've asked for a piece of paper that says, what will the shelter crisis do? Does it create something? And I've asked probably 20 other cities, and it really doesn't change much. It's the people that are behind it that get something done. You can write anything you want, but if you don't support it and get something done, it's not going to happen. I'm just telling you. So with that being said, I will vote for it, and I hope everybody's, but tomorrow we better start working together.
Supervisor Wilson? Sure, and I do appreciate you know, the steps that are being taken, and I want to reiterate that I am a strong proponent in the power of the local voice and the local effort, as Supervisor Bones put forward. But we're talking about things like trust funds and medical health services. We're talking about things that require resources, money, externally, that we don't have the ability to put forward. And I know I've mentioned this before, but we live in a society that creates homelessness. And here we are again bickering a bit and about the strategy about how we can best allocate our meager local resources to do these things. We have income inequality is only getting bigger. This is a huge problem for us. It's a moral problem we have for our nation, and I do appreciate the faith-based efforts, and I appreciate the efforts of non-believers as well in terms of dealing with this at the local level, and I appreciate the efforts of everybody to address this on a bigger issue, on a bigger scale. The cost of housing is going up, and someone mentioned that, and there's a direct correlation between that and homelessness, and we're seeing that here in California, where basically rent is going up for everybody who rents, and it's just becoming that the barrier to getting into housing is becoming something that's just it's just becoming higher and higher, and so more people are falling by the wayside. Our budgets, not just our county budget, our state and our federal budgets are moral statements. We're a country that spends more than the next 10 countries on military. This is a moral statement that we make, and it's up to us to not just work locally on these things, but to message up the ladder that these are immoral directions that we're taking in these things. And so I just want to be clear about that. But I'm grateful on the efforts that we're doing here today, and I want us to move forward in a positive way.
Supervisor Fennell?
I just want to honor the people with feet on the ground, the local people, and the teamwork that it will take to move forward with this aggravating issue. I think I'm a lot more focused on getting it done locally, putting our minds to it, and creating our own models, because that's what we're doing here today. We're coming up with a Humboldt solution, and I hope that I wish everybody involved the best of luck.
Okay. I think we all appreciate you guys putting in the time and effort into putting this all together. It looks like you guys spent a lot of time on it. Appreciate staff's help as well. So with that, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Mr. Chair, can we have a brief break, like 5 minutes? I'm going. Hmm?
I believe we're headed into closed session. Is that
Okay,
correct?
good. No, we have one
No?
more.
Oh, the zoning, yeah. It's just a continuation.
Oh, I can
So
say it.
1:30.
It's just a continuation. It's a continuance.
Actually, I'm going to go. I'll be right back. How long is this one going to take?
30 seconds.
Brief, right? Okay. Roy, for your thoughts.